Hi guys, so today I'm going to show you how I paint these girls from my girl collection. I get a lot of messages from people that think that my files look kind of difficult to paint and maybe they don't love painting. So I just wanted to show you how you can get these done fairly quickly and they're not difficult to do. And they're kind of fun to paint. So I take my piece out of the laser bed intact. I want all of the pieces to look exactly like it did when it cut right from the laser. So I just lay masking paper over it and rub it so that everything stays. Then I'll flip it over and just check and make sure everything cut really well. I want to start on my work surface with the piece exactly how it was when it cut. So I always start these girls with their faces because I don't worry about going onto the border or the other pieces of hair. It's fine. So paints. I get asked this multiple times a week, what kind of paints I use, and I use everything. I use like just cheap craft paints, acrylic paints, spray paint, all kinds, anything that I have. I'm more about the color than the paint. But one tip is I do like to start with chalk paint. I like to put just a little bit as my base because I just find it's got a really nice texture. It's thick. So I always start with a little bit of chalk paint. And I never use color right from the bottle. No matter what I'm doing, I just like to mix my own colors. So I am going to try to get a nice skin tone. Sometimes it's hard to get the skin right, but it's okay. We're just going to mix some colors together and come up with a nice skin tone. So I do like that chalk paint mixed in there. It gives you a thicker paint to start with. I want my first layer to be kind of thick. This is a really small brush to be mixing. Let me grab another one. Okay, that's better. So I'm just going to mix it all in. I usually like to have a little piece of wood next to me just to test it. That looks good. It's maybe a little pink. Let's throw some beige in there. You can just play around with mixing until you find the skin tone that you want. Okay, so that might still be a little pink, but it's okay. So I kind of like to use, I'll use a regular paintbrush, but I like to use a foam brush because you can get a really thick, even layer. So I'm going to start with the foam brush. It does soak up your paint quite a bit, so you might have to mix more, but again, I am not worried about going outside of the area. All of that will be covered when I paint her hair later, and it really doesn't show. But the most important thing is you do want to get a really nice smooth layer on there. And this is also a good time to get an idea of if you use the right skin tone. That looks really kind of pinky. I'm gonna mix a little bit of a better skin color. Let's get a little bit of beige in here. I don't like their faces to be too pink. Matching the skin tone is probably the most difficult part of mixing paints because you just really never know what you're going to get. What looks good on your palette sometimes doesn't look the same when it dries. So I play around a lot with different colors. Okay, that's much closer to what I want. So I don't put a lot of paint on these. I want to put a few thin layers, enough that's going to give me a good coverage. But if you put too much paint, you're going to lock these pieces in there and it's going to be hard to remove them. So I kind of go with a dry brush approach, get off some of my paint. It's just finding that perfect balance between having enough paint to give you good coverage, but not too much paint that it's excessive. So again, I'm just going to go across her face, make sure I'm getting in all the corners and that you don't see any brush strokes because you want it to dry really nice and opaque, solid looking on these girls. And it's okay if your first couple of layers don't give you great coverage because you can always go back once you disassemble this and fix your colors. Sometimes if I put too much paint, I'll take a baby wipe and just rub it over it. I'll do it now so I can show you. This one's actually fine, but sometimes I like to just get a baby wipe in there. It helps you to blend, whoops, I'm making a mess here. It helps you to blend that paint that may have, you know, built up too much in one area. You don't have to do this step. I don't if my paint is going on really nicely, but I just wanted to show you how if you like to see the wood grain underneath, you can just blend. Some of my pieces are coming out. That's okay. All right. So I don't like to see the wood on these girls. I do like to have a really good coverage, but just in case you do, I wanted to show you that. So I'm just going to go back and give this another layer. Make sure I'm getting an even coverage all the way across. And she looks pretty good. So normally I would let this dry a little bit, but since I want to show you the whole thing, I'm just going to go ahead. I will start taking this apart. This paint is still wet, obviously. So I will just set this aside, pop out all your pieces. Normally, like I said, this would be dry, so I wouldn't be having a hard time. That little tiny nose piece. Okay, I'm gonna set this aside to dry, and then I can check it later and make sure I got really nice coverage on it. Sometimes I'll even paint the hair while it's intact, but for now, I'm just going to start that while it's here and ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to pull off all these features that I don't want to do right now. I try to keep all the eye pieces and the lip pieces because they're so small. I want to keep them kind of where they belong, especially the eyes, because you want to make sure you're putting back the right pieces. Those little triangular parts can be a pain. Okay, so this is all hair. And I'm just going to mix something up. Let's give her, let's see, maybe we'll make her have kind of red hair. I love mixing paints and making my own colors. I'm really messy. That's really pink. Let's mix in some brown. And again, I'm probably going to add some chalk paint. I just use the Waverly paints, or Folk Art is a nice chalk paint. Let's grab some of this. This paint's pretty much on its way out. It's really thick. Okay. So let's add some yellow. I just kind of keep mixing until I'm at a color that I like. You can use it straight from the bottle or whatever you want to do. Okay, so I love this color. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly, I want to remove some of this paint, but I'm going to quickly just go over these pieces. Again, kind of a dry brush. You don't want too much. I'm not worried about painting on the sides of the piece. They're going to be covered up. So you can be quick. Just want to make sure that you're getting really good coverage on these pieces. I'll be putting on a second coat, so I'm not too worried that they might not be perfectly even. It's okay. But I do try to make my strokes even and smooth. And if you don't like the color that you did, like this is really pink, it's fine. I think it's pretty, but you can always change your color for your second layer. Oops. I have a little tool, a little pick tool that I usually use to hold on to these pieces while I'm painting, but I forgot to grab it, so I'm just holding it with my nail. I'm not using my fingertip because I don't want to have a fingerprint in my paint. I'm kind of going quicker than I normally would so that this video won't be too long, but even though it looks like I'm being super messy, I am careful with my painting. I want it to be really perfect when it's finished. Okay. So that's all of my pieces, I think. Just gonna double check. Can't remember what that piece was, but we're gonna paint it just in case. It's the problem when you mix your own colors, is if you don't keep the paint or it dries, then you have to go back and try to mix up paint that matches. So that can be difficult. So I'm just going to take a look. I can see that I didn't get great coverage on all of these pieces. Just going to go back and touch up. This is also where, if you like to blend paints or see a little bit of the wood underneath, you can take a baby wipe and just rub your paint on and blend it. Sometimes I really like the look of some of the paint missing in the middle and darker on the edges. But for these girls, I really like them to be pretty opaque looking. That's just, I'm probably not going to do my best job on this, but I'm trying not to make this super lengthy. I don't know why I make videos that are designed to show you how easy something is, and I end up talking for 45 minutes. Okay. So we're just going to move on, and normally I would take a good look at these, make sure the paint's really perfect, but it's fine for now. Okay, I'm gonna move all these aside so they can start drying. Oops. Okay, so I'm just going to mix something for her shirt piece. And then I'll probably use the same color for the eyes. Just take a baby wipe and clean off my brush a little bit. Or sometimes I'll just switch brushes. That's a little bit too bright. I like more muted tones of paint. I often mix in, I almost always mix in a brown or a beige to any color that I use. It just tones down the paint and gives me the palette that I like, which is a much more muted color. Okay, so just make sure you have really good coverage. Try to avoid stroke lines. And we'll let that dry. Okay, so let's move on to these little facial features. The only ones you have to paint are the insides of the eyes and the lips. I know they are little pieces. I try to avoid drawing designs that have tiny pieces, but sometimes it's unavoidable. So let's make her eyes the same color. Oops. Same color as her shirt. Just I know my hands are covered in paint. Story of my life. Okay. I'm getting a little bit of excess paint in here, and when you go to put it in the section it belongs, that's gonna, even when it's dry, it's going to come out. So I try to avoid doing that, but it's all right. This is really just for making a video. When I make a sign or something for a customer, I'm super, super particular about making sure everything's perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna wipe some of this paint off my hands. I don't want it to get on any pieces. Okay, so I'm gonna do the little lips. And grab a smaller brush. You can use chalk pens or paint pens for these little pieces also. But they're like a 2-second paint job. Whoops, it's okay. So the whites of the eyes, I always do whites with a Posca paint pen. It's just so much easier than painting them. Actually, sometimes what I'll do if it's summer, I'll take them outside and spray paint them so they're really perfect. But it's winter and it's snowing, so spray paint doesn't do well. So I'm just going to, I usually put 2 or 3 coats on these because I want the whites to be really solid and perfect. But just to make this quicker. I have this pen in a few different sizes. I love these Posca white paint pens. I use them for any kind of detail that needs to be white. They're just really nice. Get right to the edges. Okay. I will go back and do another coat and take a really close look at it. But I wanted to move on and show you the outline painting. Whoops. I'm being really messy. Okay. So the outline piece, normally in the summer, I will just take this piece outside and spray paint it black. But it's winter here, it's snowing, and spray paint doesn't do so well in Michigan in the winter. So what I do, let's move all these little pieces. I'm getting paint on these, it's okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, I love this black matte folk art paint. I use this a lot in the winter time when I need a good coverage of black and I can't really spray paint. So I will just grab a bunch and put it on my palette, my plate. so that I have a lot there. Oops, okay. And if you are not already using these little finger dabbers for painting, you really should get some. I bought these on Amazon. I have a huge bag of them. They're just great for doing quick sections of areas that you don't have to be really, really careful on. They make painting so quick. So I'm going to dab off some of the excess, and then I'm just going to do my outline really quick. Sometimes I rub, but when you rub, you can see it doesn't really cover as well as when you dab, because obviously it's going to rub off a little bit of the paint, but it does make it nice and smooth. So sometimes I rub it on, sometimes I dab it on. Doesn't matter how you do it. Just want to get that coverage when you can't spray paint. And it does go on really smoothly. I don't worry about getting onto the sides. It's already so dark there from the laser cutting that it really just blends in there. If you don't like having any paint on the sides, you can just wipe that off with a baby wipe. Dab off the excess. Make sure you're getting really good coverage. Okay, let's just get this all covered. And then I'll show you a couple more things. And then it's really just assembling it, super easy. These maybe take me 15-20 minutes to paint. Okay, so this is all covered. And then I'll just do the little facial features. Same way, just dabbing or rubbing the paint on. I should have grabbed my little grabber tool. It's just like almost like a dental pick. And you can just kind of hold it from the edge when you're painting these small pieces, but it's all right. Okay. If you're gonna look for these dabbers on Amazon, I'm not exactly sure what they're called. Finger paint dabber or finger dabbers or something like that, but they're great. Looks good. Lips. The nose is tiny. I just kind of make sure it's covered. And then the 2 eye dots. And of course, I have to go wash my hands usually to get all this paint off, but I'll just use a wipe. Okay, so this is all painted. And I'm just gonna pause for a second and let it dry because I wanna show you about adding some detail, which you have to have your paint totally dry. So I'll be back. Okay guys, so I'm back and all the paint is dry and I started reassembling this, and I just want to take a second and show you some ways you can add some interest to your paint and make it a little more dimensional than just flatly painted paint. I think it looks really nice when you have some interest and it elevates your paint job really. So I use these chalks. These are just like art chalks. I don't even know where I got them. They're probably super old, but I love them for adding a little texture. I just don't put them right on my piece. I put them on my board first. And really I just use my finger actually. Blend it a little. And you're just gonna go along your edges of your piece. Use one finger to wipe it on. Cleaner fingers to remove some of it. This is kind of a light color. I don't know if you could tell. I'm going to use something a little darker. Let's see. Let's try this dark brown. Of course, you do get it all over your fingers, so you might want to wipe your hands once in a while, so that it's just going to go where you want it. Okay. So again, just putting some on my fingers and going along the edge, wiping some off. It's really just giving you some dimension to your piece. Looks really nice when it's assembled and it's not just flat. Let's see, where does this one go? Down here. So I didn't do it on all my pieces, but I will. I just wanted to put this together quickly so you could see. You don't have to use chalks. You can use oil pastels, even markers. I have some Tombow art markers. Wait, I'll show you that in a second. So again, you can see it's just adding a little dimension. Gives you some highlights in there. So let me grab, these are Tombow art markers. They're water-based, so when you rub some onto your piece, you can wipe it off again with a baby wipe or with a paintbrush and some water. Okay, I'll just use it. Let's do this piece. It's kind of big. So you don't have to worry about being really careful because you're going to wipe most of this off. So I will either dip my finger in water or use a paintbrush. You're just going to blend it. And yes, I know it looks terrible and messy, but I'm going to use a baby wipe and get rid of most of that. Don't want to have any hard lines. Actually, kind of making it messy looking, but I don't know if you can see, you're still getting the shading in there. It's a little less controlled with the marker, but I would go in there with a paintbrush, like a fine paintbrush, and get it a little bit wet, and then you can just blend until you have it really nice looking. And you can fix up those areas with a wipe or a paintbrush. But I prefer to use the chalks because you get a lot more control with just using your fingers. Plus, it's nice to get your hands dirty when you're making something. It's creative. Just blend that out. It's really just about playing and finding something you really like. I wouldn't use these colors normally because I'm trying to keep in a certain kind of palette here, but I just wanted to show you with the darker colors. Go back in and blend it out. It just adds some highlights and more texture. I also like to go into these pieces that are underneath, like would normally be your hair underneath, and add some color there because our hair is usually darker underneath anyways. I normally would not do this while it was intact because I'm actually getting some chalk on the black, and I like my black to be really sharp and clean. But I just wanted to show you. Okay, so let's put this face together. I'm gonna wipe my hands off because I don't want to get any chalk on the skin. These little tiny eye pieces are sometimes a pain, but you need them for the detail. So again, with like a piece down here, I would want to add some color. I am going to use one of these dabbers. Just go along the edge. I don't go on all four sides. I don't want it really uniform and perfect looking. And I don't know why that doesn't want to fit. Okay. So let's So these eye middles, I added a little white dot with a Posca pen, the white pen. I just want to make a little circle so it's sort of like a reflection on the eye. Just a little detail. And if your circle isn't perfect, you can always touch it up with black paint. So she's pretty much done. The last thing is the pink on the cheek. I already did this, I forgot. But I just want to show you how you can, that's not the right one. How you can add a little blush on the cheeks. You don't want a hard circle. So again, I use these chalks. I rub it on my sponge and then I rub it off because you really want it very faint. It's better to layer it darker than to start dark and have a hard circle. So I just lightly rub it on and you're getting that little blush, which again just adds some more texture to your design, a little more detail. Makes it cute. You can add as much as you want. You can also pretty much rub this off with a baby wipe if you need to. And that's about it. Normally I would have gone on a few more of these pieces, but I just wanted to make this video a little shorter. So let me know if you have any questions, and I hope this, oh wait, I forgot her nose. I hope this tutorial was helpful. I'm not the best at making videos, so I hope this at least helped to show you how simple these are to paint. Thanks for watching, guys.